I call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm delighted to speak in the second reading of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Amendment Bill, which has been returned from the committee that I have the privilege of chairing. I want to acknowledge the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, who's mustering this bill through the House, but more importantly, I want to acknowledge Minister the Honourable Nikki Kay. She's put a tremendous amount of work into this legislation. She worked hard in listening to what the committee said as we considered the submissions on it. I know that she'll be tuned in, listening to this debate now, and I look forward to her being back in the House for the committee stages and the third reading. I hope that she's making a speedy recovery. It's a big challenge that she's facing in terms of her health, but we're doing good work that she started, and I think she'll take a bit of kudos from that. So the intention of this legislation is to really update the civil defence legislation. It has been very response-focused, very command and control, and while that's appropriate for the immediate times after a civil emergency, what this bill seeks to do, and I think has taken some quite good lessons from the situation that we faced in Christchurch through our sequence of earthquakes, is move more from response to recovery. As Paul Foster-Bell just noted, this bill's part of a wider review of the different levels of response that might be needed. We were a little frustrated at the committee that we couldn't look at the whole package because it's really important that they are consistent, but I hope that the next stage of the review and the next legislation is referred to our committee as well, so that we can consider what we learnt during the deliberations on this bill and what we might put into the next bill. We made a lot of changes, and I want to commend, in a rare moment of cross-party recognition, I want to commend the national members of our Select Committee because they took the submissions seriously, they took the views of the Green Party and Labour Party members seriously, and I think we worked really collaboratively to get a much better outcome. Some of it isn't quite how we want it. Perhaps at the end and in the committee stage we still might have some supplementary order papers that we table, but I hope we don't. We might just keep talking to each other and end up with a bill that is agreed across all of Parliament, and I think that would be good in many circumstances, but particularly if we're looking at a response to a civil defence emergency situation. So this is the new legislative framework for emergency response. It's got very clear mandates for roles and responsibilities. It supports a seamless transition from the response to the recovery, and it creates a permanent legislative authority to assist the Crown in reimbursing local authorities. Actually, more importantly, to give local authorities the confidence that the Crown will pay up. Local authorities in an immediate situation are required to pay out quite a lot of money, and this new authority that we're using in this bill will give city councils, territorial local authorities, the confidence to know that the government, in the end, the Crown, will pay out. We thought that that new authority would cause quite a lot of debate. It was far less contentious than we imagined during the first reading of this bill, and I'm sure that other members will comment on that during the committee stages and the third reading. I have to say, Mr Speaker, that despite the best efforts of the officials to guide us to be comfortable with the quite strong ministerial powers that were in the original bill, we remain quite uneasy. We are not interested in giving ministers powers that they don't need, and certainly after the Christchurch experience, powers that were used for the purposes other than what was originally intended. We've seen in Christchurch, for example, over 300 heritage buildings demolished, not because they were unsafe, which was the intention of demolition orders in the original Christchurch earthquake recovery legislation, but because, can I give the House an example, Mr Speaker? The Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery at the time, Jerry Brownlee, wanted to widen Manchester Street, so had a demolition order put on the Majestic Theatre. So that heritage-listed building is gone so that we have a wider street. So it was clearly outside the powers that were intended when this Parliament debated the earthquake recovery legislation. We were specifically clear on the powers of demolition, the powers to override individual property owners' rights, let alone heritage listings. So when this bill came to our Select Committee, we looked at ministerial powers really closely, and I think that now, through the amendments that we made at the committee, we've got the balance a lot better. I mentioned in my introductory comments that the large-scale responses are not covered by this legislation. I understand that things sometimes need to be done in parts, because often a comprehensive review will take longer than some parts of it would be preferable to have implemented. So this part of the review is being implemented, but I just want to put on record again that I want to make sure that we have consistency across the different stages of the review, because otherwise we'll have what is the worst thing in response to a natural disaster, and that is confusion about roles and responsibilities. So we need to make really sure that communities are really clear about their roles and responsibilities, that the civil defence officials are really clear, and in the middle, territorial local authorities, city councils, district councils. Mr. Speaker, a very interesting part of the bill was the debate around section 57A. The committee members all agreed that the content of 57A was not clear. There was no debate about that. The debate came as to what to do about that. Those on our side of the table thought that we could make it clearer, and those on the other side of the table thought that because it was unclear we should remove it. That isn't my preferred option, and I really think that we could have worked a little bit harder to get the wording right and clear. So we now don't have the strategic recovery plan provision in that section of the bill. It's been removed. Again, I'd offer the National Party the opportunity to think further on that and see whether or not they'd like to take the opportunity during the committee stages to see if we can do just a little bit more work and get that right. I mentioned earlier about the permanent legislative authority. We were really concerned that this was a mechanism that was not common, that really overrode quite a lot of other existing provisions, but we got very sound advice from Treasury about the appropriateness, I guess, of that mechanism, how it would give both central government and local government confidence about who was responsible for paying for what in response to a natural disaster. I think, again, if you want to look at the Christchurch example, Christchurch City Council has still been arguing quite recently about the various responsibilities of post-quake financial liability. So this gives that clarity. I should say to the local authorities that it also is a message from Parliament that we have confidence that they will only expend funds as they're necessary. We don't have any doubt that we don't have any fear that we'll suddenly get a bill from a local authority for expenditure of things they didn't need to. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, can I just say that the quality of submissions and the quality of advice and discussion from officials has made what started off as a very good bill, and again I commend the Minister for the way she engaged with people who were involved right through from the hierarchy of civil defence through to leaders in the community. So the Honourable Nikki Kay deserves credit for the original legislation, but we made, through the submission process and listening to the officials and working together, a very good bill, even better. That's what Parliament should aim for every time. I think that as a result of this, we can have confidence that our communities won't be left out of responses from civil defence. They will be able to play their part, that local authorities won't be usurped by the civil defence hierarchy, and that we'll all be able to do our part to respond to these situations. People in Canterbury felt left out. The volunteers weren't able to contribute. We heard that very strongly. Our local authority, Christchurch City Council, as well as Waimakariri and Selwyn, felt as if they were just going along for the ride and didn't have any role in important decision-making, and as a result, contributed less to the response than they could have if they'd been involved right from day one. So I think we've learnt a lot from things that happened. They were errors in hindsight, but at the time they were done with the best intention. So I think, as I say, Mr. Speaker, we've made a good bill even better, and I look forward to its further progress in the House.